The hidden truth about ancestors in South Africa. What if everything you were taught about ancestors was incomplete or even harmful? What if the rituals meant to honor them are the very actions disturbing their rest? For generations in South Africa, people have followed ancestral practices without question. But today, we must ask a difficult question. Are these practices serving the ancestors, or are they serving the living? This video is not about attacking culture. It is about truth, justice, and accountability. In the Ancestral Justice Program, we examine spiritual systems through the lens of consequence, energy, and universal law. Truth does not fear examination. If a practice is righteous, it will withstand scrutiny. If it causes harm, it must be questioned. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you may see ancestors, rituals, and spiritual responsibility in a completely different light. For centuries, ancestral practices have been followed with absolute obedience. People are told what to do, when to do it, how to do it, and what will happen if they do not. These instructions are rarely questioned because questioning is labeled as disrespect, rebellion, or spiritual ignorance. But truth requires courage. The first question we must ask is simple yet powerful. Who benefits from these practices? Are ancestors truly at peace because of them, or are the living using rituals to manage fear, guilt, and uncertainty? Many people participate in rituals not because they understand them, but because they are afraid of consequences. Fear is never the foundation of justice. Fear-based obedience does not bring peace, it sustains control. In the ancestral justice framework, any system that operates primarily through fear must be carefully examined. Following tradition without understanding does not make an action righteous. It only makes it familiar. A critical question rarely asked is whether ancestral rituals allow the dead to rest. Rest is associated with peace, stability, and completion. Yet many rituals are performed repeatedly, urgently, and reactively, often after dreams, sickness, financial loss, or fear. This suggests instability, not rest. When an ancestor is truly at peace, they do not demand attention through fear. They do not threaten illness, misfortune, or death. Peace does not manipulate. Peace does not torment. Peace does not need blood. Peace does not need slaughtering animals. If ancestors were meant to rest, why are they constantly summoned, consulted, fed, and appeased? In the ancestral justice teaching, justice brings closure, not endless cycles. Repeated rituals often indicate unresolved spiritual disturbance rather than harmony. We must ask honestly, are we honoring ancestors, or are we pulling them back into unrest? Every spiritual action operates within a spiritual energy system. There is no neutral ground. In ancestral justice, we identify two opposing forces: dark spiritual energy and bright spiritual energy. Dark energy is associated with death, bloodshed, fear, pain, illness, destruction, instability, and suffering. Bright energy is associated with life, peace, joy, rest, healing, clarity, and protection. Now consider this carefully. Rituals that involve blood sacrifice, fear-driven compliance, and threats of punishment align with which energy? Life or death? Peace or fear? An animal, created to live, is killed for the dead. Blood is spilled to communicate with spirits. This is not the language of rest. This is the language of darkness. Bright energy does not require blood. It does not demand fear. It does not operate through threats. If a practice produces fear instead of peace, suffering instead of healing, then it must be questioned, no matter how old it is. One of the most common requirements in ancestral rituals is the slaughtering of a goat or cattle. This act is often justified as respect, obedience, or tradition. But justice requires intent and consequence to be examined. Why must blood be spilled for the dead? What spiritual force responds to blood? Does peace demand death? In universal justice, life does not restore life by destroying life. Killing an innocent animal to appease spirits introduces imbalance. It reinforces a cycle where death feeds death. If an ancestor lived a righteous life and crossed into a place of rest, joy, and peace, what happens when blood rituals are performed in their name? You may unknowingly pull that ancestor out of rest and expose them to dark spiritual forces that operate through sacrifice and fear. This is not honor. This is disturbance. Many people assume their ancestors are suffering because they are demanding rituals. But what if the suffering began after the rituals? What if peace was replaced with unrest because of actions taken by the living? In ancestral justice, we teach that actions have consequences across generations. When you open spiritual doors through blood, fear, and obligation, you invite forces that do not bring rest. Once opened, these doors do not close automatically. What was once peace becomes fear. What was once rest becomes instability. What was once protection becomes oppression. And then the living suffer financially, emotionally, physically, without understanding why. They respond by performing more rituals, deepening the cycle. Justice asks us to stop and reflect before repeating harm. Here is the question no one wants to ask. When your time comes to cross over, where will you go? Spiritual actions are not erased by time. They are recorded by consequence. If unresolved disturbances exist, they do not disappear simply because a person lived a good life. Justice requires accountability, not denial. Your ancestors may call you, not because they want to, but because actions created a bond that must be resolved. In ancestral justice, we teach that correction is possible, but only through truth, awareness, and intentional cancellation of harmful actions. This is not about fear. This is about responsibility. Truth is not meant to destroy culture. Truth is meant to purify it. Justice is not meant to condemn ancestors. Justice is meant to bring rest. If this message challenged you, it is because it touched truth. If it brought clarity, it is because clarity was needed. Like this video. Subscribe to the channel. If you want guidance on correcting past actions, restoring peace, and breaking harmful cycles, I can assist you through the ancestral justice framework. Do not live in fear. Do not inherit confusion. Choose justice, truth, and peace. Click on the link to get hold of your advice package today.